Welcome to today's webinar. I hope you will learn a few things and find a way to improve your business and its continuity. I'm going to start with 26 billion reasons why you should protect yourself and your organization. Last February, 26 billion data records were stolen and published on the dark web. That means that it's likely that all of us have some sort of data available to a hacker. Most of today's devastating breaches still start with a single email. More insidiously, it's about stealing power user credentials. This allows criminals to gain access to productivity suites to take over your entire organization's accounts, send emails, make financial requests, and spread malicious code everywhere the user's identity is authorized to go. Attacks have evolved from simple mass spam campaigns to highly sophisticated ransomware and extortion schemes. Email phishing attacks have been widely implicated as the initial threat vector for a range of subsequent cyber attacks, including ransomware and breaches of customer and employee data, usually through password stealing, providing access to email accounts, confidential files, and online services. Email attacks are a subset of targeted phishing attacks that focus on direct theft of financial resources. Email compromise attacks are a specific type of phishing attack. They rely on targeting a specific person or role type in an organization and often seek monetary payment as a direct outcome. They do this by changing account numbers on a valid invoice to a fraudulent bank account, submitting a fake invoice for payment, diverting employee payroll to their own accounts, or using impersonation of senior executives to lend credibility to plausible but irregular requests, like paying a large sum to a new bank for a purchase or acquisition. The most dangerous type of supply chain compromise occurs when a partner or outside email is compromised, as it provides the opportunity for long-term surveillance and the hijacking of ongoing conversations. First, the hackers send an email to the target that appears to come from a trusted source, typically a brand name like Microsoft or an internal department like IT or HR. These emails are meant to inspire action, prompting the unsuspecting employee to enter their email address and password or something else. Once those credentials are entered on the fake website, they become fair game for the next stage of the attack. Next, most attackers will quickly determine which customers are active and identify ongoing payment cycles or outstanding invoices. Fraudsters then exploit that knowledge to impersonate a vendor and insert themselves into an email conversation about a financial transaction using an email sent from the compromised account itself. To prevent its owner from becoming aware of both the intrusion and the correspondence with his or her regular contacts, the hacker manipulates mailbox rules. Diligent surveillance of the compromised mailbox could represent the difference between successful payout for the hacker and their discovery. So, attackers automatically hide emails in folders and auto-forward messages to control message exposure. By doing so, they can keep access to the account, sometimes for months. One example of many possibilities is the aging report theft. It's a subset of financial supply chain compromise that has become increasingly common over the last few years. While these attacks are similar to vendor email compromise in that they use insider information to craft contextually accurate attacks, they don't necessarily rely on the compromise of an email account to gather information. Instead, the attackers steal a copy of a single document, an internal aging report, to collect intelligence needed to facilitate their attacks. As you can see in this email, they ask for the payment but with updated ACH information, which would have the person paying for the invoice send the money to a malicious account. Always be wary of what information is out there. OSINT, or open source intelligence, means information that anyone can look up and legally obtain. This could be about you or your organization. One of these tools is looking at government contracts, such as state contracts or maybe something on the GSA schedule. This can reveal information about your address, income, or a few other things, but if you're not careful about what you put on these documents, we have found extremely sensitive information like bank accounts and ACH info, which could be devastating in the wrong hands. The final subset of financial supply chain compromise is a category we call blind impersonation attacks. In each of the three previous categories, an attacker has at least basic knowledge about the relationship between a vendor and customer. In an impersonation attack, however, the attacker has no knowledge of, in a blind impersonation attack, however, an attacker has absolutely no idea whether there is a relationship between the two companies or whether a payment is actually outstanding. Instead, scammers behind blind impersonation attacks are relying on the hope that, like so many other types of unsophisticated social engineering attacks, the target isn't paying close attention to the email and simply complies with the request. By definition, attacks rely on the compromise of a business email, a normal and highly used channel for business communication. By inserting fraudulent email messages into a stream of regular ones, it is easier for victims to fall prey to the impersonation. Organizations that I talk to see the news about how attacks, but feel that they aren't vulnerable to those types of cyber attacks. How many of you would find that surprising too? What? Organizations that I talk to see the news about attacks, but feel they aren't vulnerable to those types of cyber attacks. How many of you would be surprised to learn that you are susceptible to the same attacks? So, if one of these attacks did happen to you, how would it affect your life? If you didn't have access to files or the internet, could you access client or employee data? Do you think you would lose clients? What does that look like in terms of revenue and productivity? Here are some interesting facts from 2023. The thing that glares out here are the surge in info stealing and that over 80% of attacks could have been mitigated. Here's what we see when we do security checkups for organizations, small and large. As a cyber expert, I have to keep up with the newest threats, trends, and incidents in the industry. Threats and trends can be kept up with by reading newsletters or articles from cyber-focused news outlets and blogs. And the latest incidents are often talked about on most major news outlets. I'm sure most of you have read articles or at least seen headlines on major cyber attacks. The problem is nobody talks about cyber attacks affecting small businesses, even though they make up more than 60% of cyber attacks. What I see in the wild are these cyber attacks on small businesses, along with the stress and damage that they cause to small businesses, their owners, and employees. The reason so many cyber attacks happen to small businesses is because they are often easy targets. What I usually see when I go to assess a small business is that they have no antivirus, no backups, no email filtering, no multi-factor authentication, no browser protection, no network protection. The list goes on. If the business doesn't have any of the above, and usually they don't, I don't blame them. It's a lot to keep track of. There are so many things to protect and so many ways to protect them, it's hard to know where to start. We see it so often, we have coined the term cyber paralysis. But when it comes to cyber attacks, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The cost of implementing cybersecurity is minuscule when considering the average cost of a cyber attack on a small business is $120,000. Is that significant to your company? That stat doesn't include revenue loss due to reputation or halted operations, which, by the way, the average time for a small business to recover from a cyber attack is 14 days. How would you and your employees do payroll, carry out operations, communicate, or even do billing without your computers for 2 weeks? I'll tell you a story. There is a small restoration company based in the Aurora area with whom we interact frequently. We had never had a sales conversation with them as they did not believe they needed to implement cybersecurity measures. Unfortunately, they caught the eyes of hackers who infiltrated the company to get all of their contacts, then used their likeness to send out phishing emails to customers and business partners alike, all to get a hold of sensitive information and download malware on their computers. This ended up damaging their reputation and harming other companies, like an environmental testing company that sends customers their way. Another company that these emails were sent to was a different environmental testing and consulting company who happens to be a customer of ours. While the other two companies had to spend hours reaching out to each employee to make sure they didn't click the link and then check for malware on their computers, our clients didn't even need to worry because our email filtering software blocked the malicious email before it even showed up in their mailbox. That simple act of prevention saved them hours of work, frustration, worry, and worse. To measure your company's most basic cyber preparedness, ask yourself, do my employees have an antivirus? Does my company have backups of important data? Have those backups been tested? Do I have email protection? Do I see multi-factor authentication as an annoyance or a tool? Multi-factor authentication usually takes 30 seconds to clear, which can be annoying, but it prevents 99% of hacks on protected accounts. This is commonly known as the simplest, most effective, and most freely available cybersecurity tool out there. Is that worth it? Being a small business is rarely easy. To review, the major disadvantages of being a small business are the lack of awareness in the cyber world, unpreparedness for cyber events, lack of time, knowledge, and expertise to properly implement cybersecurity measures, and if you are hit by an attack, you are much more likely to go out of business. 60% of small businesses that experience a cyber attack go out of business within 6 months. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. You do have a couple of advantages, like your environment is simpler and therefore easier and less expensive to protect. You will also experience less sophisticated attacks, like the attacks you experience likely won't be funded by governments or advanced hacker groups, also known as APTs. Another story. Fran Finnegan was on vacation in New York just before the 4th of July weekend when he received a disturbing text from one of his customers. How come his website was down? Fran quickly reached out to a computer remotely to examine his site, which provides access to millions of documents filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. There he discovered a disaster unfolding in front of his eyes. Hackers had breached his site's security and taken over. He watched helplessly as they encrypted all his files, placing them beyond reach. How could this happen? 24 years ago, when Finnegan originally set up his business website, SEC Info, He gave himself administrative privileges so he could manage the system and protect his access with the password. The password he used, however, was the same as the password he was using for his Yahoo email account. That password was probably stolen in a massive hack in 2013 that also compromised the names, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, and security questions of 3 billion Yahoo account holders. At the time, Yahoo advised its users to change the passwords on their Yahoo accounts, but Finnegan had long since forgotten that he had also used that password as his administrative password. He said, had I remembered that I was using a password from 24 years ago, I certainly would have changed it. As he later discovered, beginning on June 26th, the hackers pinged his system 2.5 million times before they finally hit on the right password. He says the firewall logs established that the hacking originated from Russia. The hackers were able to encrypt everything on his servers, not only the database of documents, but also Finnegan's email system, and even his list of users and their contact information. That means that once SEC info was back in operation, he wasn't able to proactively inform his customers what had happened. He had to wait for them to get in touch with him, all 500,000 of them. So think about what could happen to you if you couldn't collect invoices, serve customers, and you were essentially dead in the water for 2 to 3 weeks. Who in your company is going to call your top 40 customers to let them know that an incident occurred? How do you think your clients would react if they know that their data got leaked in a cybersecurity incident? Or your employees, for that matter? There are tens of thousands of successful attacks every year. A minority of these are publicly disclosed and covered in media channels. But there are lots of examples nonetheless, such as the Treasure Island. It was a charity in San Francisco that paid $625,000 into the wrong bank account after hackers gained access to the bookkeeper's email account and changed the payment details. The money was intended to be a loan to a partner to enable a new building project to start combating homelessness. The misdirected payments were not detected for a month. The FBI declined to investigate, and One Treasure Island did not recover the funds. For a charity with a revenue of only $2.4 million in 2019, the lost payments represent a sizable portion of overall revenue. In many organizations, IT teams don't prioritize network security. Rather than committing rigorously to protect their assets and take a proactive approach to security, these companies reflect an apathetic perspective that carries a hefty price tag. How much have you improved your security situation in the last year? Do you think you're staying ahead of criminals or falling further behind? What are you doing to ensure that your organization will be able to survive and thrive? As a quick reminder, some of the ways that a cyber attack could impact you. It could cost weeks of work. It is very likely that a cyber attack would cost more than $100,000, along with the frustration and loss of reputation. Do you have any questions? Thank you.